So this was a little bit of a change in the schedule, so we're kind of going to wing this a little bit. I'm also going to apologize because I've got day 3 consensus voice, but I think hopefully you can still hear me and my questions can be understood. These guys really need no introduction. I think I have, clearly one of the most influential people in the blockchain space here to my right, and further to the right, one of the more influential people in really broad thinking around economics, networks, and sort of the basic structure of economies generally. So Joe and George, thank you very much for doing this. The way I want to take this conversation is just to go from sort of, I think, a rather specific conversation you were having in that previous panel and take it way up to 30,000 feet and think about where we are at in terms of the overall architecture of the internet and what might come of Web3 as we move toward it with blockchain technologies and all these other aspects of change that is happening right now. And I think, George, you've got this new book out, Life After Google, that looks, I think, at this where things might go toward from, I suppose, the original dream of the internet being Web 1. We had this vision of a fully open, fully accessible, a marketplace of ideas that nobody could control. And in Web 2, we have, well, Google, right? And we have Amazon and we have Facebook, but that's pretty much. We've had this consolidation of these behemoths that run it. The dream now is to break all that up again. I suppose I'd like to know from you, how do we get there, and what maybe lay out what the real challenges are of the existing architecture.
Well, the essence is that you guys, that this movement, this global blockchain and its derivatives, its Ethereum and Bitcoin, have really represent the only existing remedy for the 2 great crises of the global economy today. One is the collapse of internet security. It turns out that centralization is not safe. Every year, we spend 20 to 30% more on internet security, and last year we had 1 billion breaches, the worst year ever. The more we spend, the less security we get, and that's because security is intrinsically a problem of architecture. It's not a video game. It's not a set of patches and fixes. It's a fundamental architecture, and the blockchain represents the new architecture for internet security. That's what it is. The collapse of internet security leads to no one trusting anybody. I mean, we can't even have Huawei's routers in the US telecom system because the breakdown of trust on the internet, as Michael's been writing about, afflicts everybody. And so this is a great crisis of the internet today, 1 billion breaches, and you got the solution to it. The second great crisis is the scandal of money. People imagine that zero interest rates and the abolition of cash and all these extreme measures actually represent some kind of plausible policy for money. But the biggest industry in the world economy today is not agriculture or anything else, transportation. It's currency trading. $5.1 trillion a day of currency trading, and it doesn't even establish sufficiently reliable and trustworthy currencies that every international transaction almost doesn't have to be hedged. It's the chief cause of this $5.1 trillion a day, 25 times all world GDP, 73 times all trade in goods and services. The only reason for this is to allow politicians and central banks to print money to give to their cronies and to impose the burdens on future generations. That's what this $5.1 trillion industry is about. And your industry is about ending that scandal of money, restoring a global measuring stick for commerce. And so these are, I believe that this is what Daniel Patrick Moynihan used to call a unity, a single new policy initiative that solves a huge range of problems. It follows Drucker's law, which is don't solve problems, pursue opportunities. And this is the big opportunity in the world economy today.
Thanks for that rousing
how do you
call to
follow
action
that?
there, George.
That's
You seem to have some approval out there.
Can I
yeah, jump in, Joe,
on
go
a few
for
of
it.
those? So that was extremely well said. So with respect to security, the internet was formed in naive times. My friend Dave Marin likes to say that we're currently running our economy on a network that was built by academics to trade research papers. And we built layers of security as band-aids, as patchwork on top of that. And we now, with public key cryptography, have an opportunity to build infrastructure that is secure from the bottom up all the way through. And with blockchain, with different kinds of decentralized protocols, we have the opportunity to rebase all of the technologies, all of the industries that have been running for thousands of years on a flimsy subjective trust layer. We can rebase all of those things on automated trust, on objective trust, on guaranteed execution of agreements. And so that's a pretty profound transformation that we are, I believe, all going to be able to participate in. With respect to money, I agree to a fair degree. I think that we're going to be able to go even further. So we are seeing, with quantitative easing, we are seeing the end of life of monetary systems. Monetary systems generally last on average about 70 years, and so we are in that stage that I got worried about a decade or maybe 15 years ago, where there's just too much debt in the system, and essentially it will lead to either nonlinear cascading collapses or central bankers kicking the can down the road for quite a long time to try to create so much money that we can pay off all the debt with devalued currencies. I'm hoping for the latter case. I've been hoping for the latter case for quite a long time, because that'll give us the opportunity to build more sound infrastructure. And I think that infrastructure will eventually take us away from dependency on money per se, as we have these new trust infrastructures, or this new trust infrastructure. What we get from that is the ability to create networks where we can collaborate. So instead of businesses setting up their own siloed infrastructure on legacy database technology, instead of these walled gardens, as a foundational unit, we can start to build these collaboration networks along value chains, in industries, across industries. And so I think many of those will be tokenized, because tokenization is also enabled by this new trust foundation. If we can be certain that you can't counterfeit these digitally scarce tokens, then we can have a different kind of sound money. But we won't really need money to lubricate commerce as much as we have in the past.
Money to do what with commerce?
To lubricate commerce. Certainly facilitate, lubricate. Certainly nation states should continue to exist for as long as we all live in proximity to one another. And they should have their own token. So certainly not arguing for the elimination of money. But I do think that as we tokenize natively digital assets like computation, trustful computation and storage on Ethereum and decentralized storage and bandwidth and heavy compute on different kinds of networks, and we link all those together. And as we create digital tokens for real world assets, we're tokenizing kilowatt hours, virtually everything will be tokenized, stocks, et cetera. We will be able to trade these things for each other without the need to have money as an intermediary.
So
money is a measuring stick.
Sure,
it's how entrepreneurs guide their trade-offs and their projects and their plans. It's money is, and because it's global, it allows transactions across the world economy, and because it's also vertical, it allows transactions across time. And this is a real thing. And for 200 years, it was gold. And for 200 years, interest rates were about 3%. The Industrial Revolution flourished, and that was, and the British Empire spread around the world, for better or for worse. And this was, and I believe for the better, and this was enabled by Isaac Newton's great contribution of the gold standard. It was global money. Countries did not have their tokens. They, all money was translated into gold. And I believe gold was money because it reflected what remains scarce when everything else is abundant. And that is time. Time is what remains scarce when everything else becomes abundant. And money intrinsically is time. And money is the way we translate time calculations into the economy. And it's a real thing. And when it gets debauched, as today with $250 trillion debt overhang, a kind of doomsday pot we face today, then all economic growth stagnates because the calculations across time are all thrown into chaos. And that's really our predicament. So money is real, and we have to retrieve it. And the blockchain affords the first chance to create a money that's even better than gold. It has all the transactional facility of the new technology, while at the same time allowing a kind of model of scarcity, time scarcity, that previously was captured by gold.
Yeah, I mean, it's great that you're picking up on the time piece. I mean, in many respects, that is what the blockchain is. I mean, it is a way to measure time without there being sort of one central timekeeper, right? And with that, we can then build an entirely different metric for establishing these value exchanges. But I want to pick up on the money thing a little bit, just because I think it also brings us back to this core problem we're talking about the architecture of the internet. Because I think, I mean, the way I like to describe it is that the original sin of Web 1, the Internet 1.0, was that we figured out, as Joe puts, academics could share papers together, but the minute we had value on the internet, then we had the trust problem. Then we had to suddenly figure out how we were going to, in this decentralized architecture, figure out how to move value. And the other thing I think that's happened that's been very...
The solution to that was to give things away free.
Well, that's right.
If you don't have a stable internet of value, you then feel constrained to give everything away for free and then make deals with advertisers.
But it was never free.
And that's really
but it was never free, and this is the point, right? Yeah. So I think that and this is where I get to this point about what is money in some respect, because what does Google and what currency do they actually traffic in? It's not dollars. It's actually your data, right? So this idea that you know, I'm actually Facebook's product, not Facebook's customer. was never properly understood because people saw it as being free because they only measured that in dollar terms. But in reality, Facebook is like a currency exchange. It's taking in your data as one currency and exchanging it for dollars for itself. And that constant expenditure of this valuable other measure of exchange, data itself, I think allowed for this ultimate, consolidation, this centralization of control. So I just want to pick up on that a bit because Joe, you're sort of talking about a different vision of money, I think, somewhat from what George is saying, and he's, you're talking about a gold standard, which many in this room would say could be Bitcoin, but this is another vision. And do we get to the point where data in some way becomes the underlying currency of how this system works?
Sure. So I agree with George's vision that we can perhaps tokenize gold and enable gold to be a money again. It is a money, but also enable it to be a currency, enable it to clear and settle in the instant of the transaction in tiny fractions of value. But not just gold. We can create baskets of different kinds of assets.
Because a measuring stick can't be part of what it measures. This dream of creating baskets of various currencies just transfers the question to how you compose the basket. You don't establish a measuring stick that's outside the domain that it measures. And the reason gold worked was because gold essentially canceled technology and capital. The more technology and capital you invested in gold mining, the harder it got to mine the gold. The deeper the lodes, the more dispersed the deposits. So gold essentially became a measure of time. The time it took to extract it. That didn't change much for hundreds, thousands of years. And that's why gold became money. It's been the only successful money. And why Bitcoin was an effort by Satoshi to mimic gold. Sure. But he made some miscalculations, and that's why Bitcoin has not been as much a success as people anticipated, as I anticipated. His mistake was the assumption that gold ran out, that gold was going to run out. So therefore, you cap Bitcoin at 21 million for all time. And gold doesn't run out, time doesn't run out. It moves forward at an inexorable pace suitable for a measuring stick, like the meter or the second or the kilogram or the degree Kelvin. All these measuring sticks that make possible trade and international commerce need a measuring stick of value to mediate among goods and services in time and space.
Sure. So I'm happy to look at gold as an objective measuring stick for a while. I actually believe everything is relative, but and when we start mining asteroids, we'll find some more gold, and it'll
sure
change
will.
But back to the question of data. I think data is a new currency, and I also think attention is a new currency. I think as we tokenize things, as AI and other technologies enable us to transform society and make it easier for us to live our day-to-day lives, I think we're going to change the nature of value even. So certainly we are products of the Web 2 companies. It's worse than that they're just selling our data. They are selling our attention. It's worse than that because they know us better than we know ourselves. They are addicting us to their products. They are data mining. They are linking the data that we get that we give them from our devices to data that they acquire from different databases. They have a rich profile of us so that they can sell their product at higher prices, and they addict us to their systems, cause us to keep scrolling and clicking so they can sell us for many more hours
Shoshana
a day.
Zuboff in The Age of Surveillance Capital said that no, this idea that your Facebook's product doesn't go far enough. Yes, because in fact you are Facebook's quarry. Mining your data and then pushing it back on behavior modification. So we are stuck in this situation. Let's move to how we get out of it. And I think maybe a good place to start is Ethereum, because one of the visions that has been used to describe Ethereum is as this world computer. Right? It's a very big idea. I'm not convinced that it will be Ethereum itself. I think it's going to be a patchwork of all sorts of solutions. But I'd like you to at least, explain what that concept is, and just how do you insert the idea of this virtual global machine and smart contracts specifically into that as a solution generally to these kinds of problems where we're beholden to the Googles and Facebooks.
Sure. So calling Ethereum the world computer was a naive early expression. So we call what we're building the decentralized web, or Web 3.0. Web 3.0 will consist of platforms like Ethereum, and I believe Ethereum, because it is assiduously focused on maximal decentralization, is likely to be the best base trust layer, or the best settlement layer, and we'll build layers of technology on top of that for scalability. But Ethereum's good at automating trust, guaranteeing execution of agreements. But we need decentralized storage, we need decentralized bandwidth, we need decentralized heavy compute, we need decentralized identity, we need proof of location, et cetera. So Web 3.0 is a lot of interacting decentralized protocols.
But you did refer to Ethereum as the base layer, right? So there's this vision that Ethereum, we need to have one blockchain at the base of that? Or?
Currently there are 2 platforms that are maximally decentralized and that are really focused on defining all the dimensions of decentralization, from number of nodes to number of people controlling the nodes to number of legal infrastructures that those nodes are all located in, different nations, to power grids that all those nodes are located in, to the developers, to different kinds of governance systems that are associated. So define all of those things, measure decentralization, and you've got Bitcoin and Ethereum. No other projects are really that focused on decentralization. So those are the 2 current candidate-based trust layers, and you can't program very well on Bitcoin.
Yeah. And the test case to me is the big crisis in the American economy, I think, is the decline of entrepreneurship. The stock market has shrunk 50% in number of public companies. Most of the demand on the stock market is companies buying up their own shares. And IPOs have been down 90% in the number of IPOs in the last 20 years. This is a real crisis, and Ethereum really addressed it. It's been the only real remedy for what is a real gravest debility of the American system. And they did initial coin offerings. And there have been $25 billion or something of initial coin offerings so far on the Ethereum platform, the ERC20 tokens. And now the whole proliferation of new forms of equity emerging in what I call a cryptocosm. And I think it shows that when people say you haven't accomplished anything yet, this was a massive accomplishment, which gave the lie to all these claims that, all we really need is Apple, Google, and Facebook, and Amazon, and we can go home. That is...
taking that a little further and linking it into your first question. Yes, we've had lots of ICOs, and some of them were good, most of them were not so good.
Like the IPOs of the
Sure.
.coms.
Sure. But the real value there is that we have this new construct, this business network platform, and we can tokenize those things. And the internet started with a dream of decentralization, and through the need for efficiencies, through the drive to consolidate value and power, we ended up with these powerful entities. And so why isn't that going to happen again in the blockchain era? I would argue that we have a chance for it not to happen because we have these network business models, these network platforms that we can tokenize, and that people can very broadly own these things. People will be able to participate on many of these, sometimes I call them topical global villages, where you can have a topical global village that is focused on curing cancer, or a topical global village that's focused on supporting a music band. And you can define the goals of that networked group, you can raise money, you can execute the work. We're building lots of future of work tools. And so the vision there is that instead of technology enabling a small set of equity owners to stack up value more quickly and larger than ever in history, governance can be decentralized on these platforms, and people can have much greater ownership, much greater agency on lots of these different networks that they're participating in.
The trust layer component of this, right? Because, you know, I think you're right. There's a lot more built into this system that will hopefully prevent us from ending up in some other centralized world. But a good friend of mine once said, you know, when he hears about something like the Ethereum virtual machine being this base layer, he thinks of the algorithm. He says, I think of this sort of algorithmic dependency as being something like, you know, Animal Farm. There's this one set of rules that ultimately is the base layer around which we are all compelled to live by, right? And that's, I just found that a very disturbing way of thinking about it. And it struck me that as much as, you know, there are great intentions behind all of the core developers, I would imagine, or most of the core developers in a lot of these decentralized systems, and as much as it is an open source system, there is a lot of bias that gets baked into algorithms, and therefore that I seem to think that...
We all live on the Intel instruction set. We all
there's
live
a whole
on
host of
TCP/IP.
it would seem to me that the way we push towards more diversity of structure, of algorithmic rules, and methods that actually then, I suppose, tie those together. So a lot of these interoperability protocol solutions, Polkadot, Cosmos, and so forth.
Well, isn't every smart contract essentially a set of algorithmic rules? I mean, that's...
Right, and each of those is individually designed, but there's still this base layer, right?
One thing that we have that's new is that all these projects are open source, and all these projects are forkable. So they're forkable at the software layer. You don't like the way this community is working, take the code and explore a different region of the solution space. They're forkable at the operating network layer. You don't like this definition of immutability. You and 10% of your friends or 50% of your friends can change the code a little bit and run a different system that maybe serves a population differently. And so we're going to be exploring the solution space with the ability to fork. Bitcoin started things, and people forked it and explored a little region of the solution
space. We've seen weaknesses to some of those forks, right? We've seen 51%
weirdnesses are good.
Well,
those are great.
True,
those are great
absolutely,
experiments.
But you did also say that there was this security that comes from the sort of the breadth of the decentralization project.
When we have an attack, when we have some sort of flaw, we learn from it. I mean, that's the only way we're going to get better.
Sure. I'm just thinking about, you know, is there a world, so it sounds like you don't see it, I don't know if you do, George, though, where this underlying architecture, I'm not talking about all the open source decentralized projects that reside on top of it, but the base consensus mechanism is actually a patchwork of different immutability systems, rather than just having this one virtual machine that proves it.
I fully agree with that.
Okay. Because that's where we need to, you know, this vision of where it goes. So, what do you think the future actually eventually looks like? I know this is asking you to truly be the true futurist that you are, but maybe we've only got 2.5 minutes left. You can give me this picture of what actually.
I think a new era of decentralization, and era of decentralization affords trust, as your book describes, and it also makes possible a new form of money, which we're having trade wars now. We're back into the 17th, 18th century of mercantilism. I mean, it's really primitive out there. And that's
like
because
Dark
of the
Ages.
collapse of trust that you write about. And what we have to do is restore trust through a new distributed system that the blockchain epitomizes, and new derivations of the blockchain. I spent yesterday with a bunch of Israelis doing space mesh, which is really quite a fascinating project that develops from blockchain cryptography, but in new ways that is very interesting. And this is happening all over the place. This is the new economy emerging.
Final word on that?
Yeah, one thing that I think is different now that has never been available to us throughout history is the ability to build decentralized systems. So when communication is slow, when decision making is slow and expensive, then top-down command and control systems, hierarchical systems, are the most efficient organizing principle. And so we've been running our societies on that for a very long time. But we've wrapped the world in many layers of communication networks, and we've developed algorithms to enable us to come to decisions in seconds, even if up to half of the actors on these networks are malicious. And so the new organizing principle of decentralization will enable us to build better systems. And so we never even thought about decentralization until fairly recently. And so the internet wasn't focused on, didn't have a way to really perpetuate decentralization. And so I think at Consensus, we're starting to think about qualifying or describing and quantifying the different dimensions of decentralization. So if we make that front and center, if certain projects focus on maximizing decentralization, then at least we'll have a measuring stick so that we can know when certain well-resourced patient actors are trying to capture this decentralization movement.
Well, we're going to wrap it up with that. Exciting times, major challenges and opportunities lying ahead. I think this is the way to think about it.
Don't bewail Google. Seize life after Google.
Thanks. Round of applause for the panel, folks.